I'm so excited to be sitting here with Annie Grace. How are you today?
Oh, I'm so good. Thanks for having me. Super fun.
Well, you are like a legend in the alcohol-free space. But in case someone's been sleeping under a rock and does not know who you are, what do you do, Annie?
So let's see if we back up. I mean, really, it's funny because people are like, "Well, are you a therapist? Are you a counselor? What are you like? What are you?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just a human, and I just had my own story, and that story just ended up, helping a lot of people through sort of my own journaling and research and stuff like that. So it's been very much my own story, but it's grown into something more than that. So now we have an institute, train coaches and podcast and books and all sorts of stuff.
Oh my gosh. So, like, this is an empire literally you've built to help people change their lives, live their best lives. Can you walk me back to the very beginning? Like, where were you 10 years ago? What did your relationship with alcohol look like? And when were you finally seeing sustainable changes? Like, what happened? And let's start there.
So 10 years ago is like such a perfect question because literally I think it was 10 years ago that things still really started to get bad. For me, just backing up a little bit before that, I didn't really drink a ton. I didn't really even go to any high school parties. I didn't drink a ton in high school. Occasionally, experimented with some stuff. And then in college, same sort of deal, not really, just wasn't really on my radar. And then when I moved to New York City after I got married, I remember my first experience. I went out to the bar with colleagues. They said, "Hey, it's your first day on the job. Come, we'll take you out for a happy hour." Didn't know what to order, so I ordered a Cosmopolitan because I'd been watching a bunch of Sex in the City, and that's not really what people were drinking, but it was kind of embarrassing in hindsight. But anyway, I got the bill for that, and it was $25, and I was like, "This is ridiculous!" And this was in 2005, and I'm like, "This is ridiculous. That's crazy. 2 drinks is $50." And so I just stopped really going out, and I do other stuff. And a different job, I had a boss take me aside and say, "Hey, why do you never show up at our happy hours?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't really drink." And he's like, "Oh, no, no, no. It's not about the drinking. It's about networking and getting your ideas showcased and being there. And so, if you care about your career, like you should show up." And so I actually created a bit of a method. I'd have a glass of wine and then a glass of water and a glass of wine and then a glass of water. And if I ever got too tipsy, I would go to the bathroom and throw up the last glass of wine just so I could keep drinking and make sure that I knew that I never wanted to be, embarrassing myself or doing anything really dumb. Cause like my whole point was like, I'm going to drink for my job, but alcohol does what alcohol does. And really fast forward a decade. And I found myself, 2 little boys at home and drinking close to 2 bottles of wine every single night. And so 10 years ago was in 2011, and I just had my second son. And it was strange. I'd suffered with sort of anxiety and depression since I was about 19, and probably before that, but actually got diagnosed at 19. And when I got pregnant with my first son, because I had that history, my midwives were like, "Okay, you need to be very careful of this. We need to be on high alert, like lots of check-ins, lots of questionnaires, all that sort of deal." And sailed through it. It was okay. It was fine. Like I felt great during pregnancy. I felt fine after pregnancy, no big deal. So then with my second son, I just assumed that was going to be the case. We didn't even consider it. And so 3 weeks after he was born in 2011, I found myself just like laying on the floor of my closet, just like so upset. And my postpartum depression lasted a long time. And I started to very heavily self-medicate in a different way. And so I think most people's journey with alcohol, there comes a point where they start to use it beyond socially, and it really takes a turn. And that was absolutely true for me. And so 2011 through like 2013, it just kept getting increasingly worse. And to the point where I was waking up in the middle of the night, beating myself up, wondering, what is wrong with me? Got on this crazy cycle of making rules for myself, like no drinking until, no drinking until the weekend. And then I couldn't make that work. So no drinking until Thursday, and then back it up till Wednesday. And then finally like, okay, just one alcohol-free day a week. And I could do it, but every time I did it, I felt deprived. I felt miserable, like I was missing out. And like I was really, not allowing myself something I believed was vital for life. I believed alcohol relaxed me and, helped me have fun and made me good at my job and loosen up in the bedroom, all these things. Like I believed the sky was blue. It was just truth. And so trying to stop drinking it, I found myself in a lot of pain. And then in this cycle of breaking rules, which created just so much self-loathing and inner turmoil, and not even being able to really look myself in the mirror and like what I saw anymore, and just not trusting myself, wondering like, if I can't do this for me, for my kids, for my husband, then like, who am I anyway? And that was a really, really painful place to be. And let's see, I guess it was probably 2013. I was coming back from a work trip in London, super, super boozy trip. And I was sitting, I had woken up, like we'd been up till 3-4 in the morning drinking, and I had to be in a cab by like 6:45 or something. And so I'd woken up super early. I hadn't even really slept, let's be honest, but I'm still drunk, and I'm also starting to feel hungover. And I go into the hotel bar and I order a mimosa because I think, okay, that's going to take the edge off, right? Like, I'm going to feel better if I just have something, was my excuse. And the waitress, she said, yeah, well, unless you're planning to drink the whole bottle of champagne, I'm not going to open a bottle for you because it's going to go flat. And I'm sitting there like, oh, I would never drink a whole bottle. Ha, ha, ha. Of course I would have. And I was like, okay, no problem. And she's like, but I could make you a vodka, a screwdriver, which is vodka and orange juice. And this was like one of those little lines in my head that like, okay, if I don't cross this line, like mimosas in the morning are fine, but hard alcohol in the morning means no, I have a problem. That's an issue. So if I don't cross that line, like, I'm cool. But I was like, oh, but I'm really desperate and I just need to get on the plane. If I just get on the plane and get back to my family, just get back to the States, I'm going to be good. So I had 3. And I got to the airport and I was now feeling drunk, hungover, and hysterical. And I was just crying and journaling. And I was writing, I still have the journal entry. And I was just writing, and I was like, in some weird moment, I mean, I'd been asking myself this one question for a while now, which is, what's wrong with me? And am I an alcoholic? Do I have a problem? And in this moment, just a new question came. And it was, one of those moments where just, it's just this pivotal moment. And the new question was, what has changed? What's different? Why is it that I'm, smart and in control in any other part of my life, but this is like this exception? Like, what's different? And why, by the way, did I used to be able to take it or leave it? I have, so many memories of not being controlled by alcohol. And now I feel like if I don't even do it for a night, I'm miserable. What is different? And so I made myself 2 promises. I said, you know what? I'm going to dust myself off, and I'm going to stop trying to stop drinking. I'm going to put myself in a timeout from all that craziness. I'm going to let myself drink what I want. And I'm only going to do that if I make the other promise to myself that I'm going to figure out what has changed. And so that launched really a year's worth of research, where that stop trying to stop drinking was really the promise of self-compassion. Like, I was going to awaken some compassion with myself to realize, I'm doing what I can with the tools I have. I'm trying to navigate a crazy career. I was global head of marketing. I was flying to, 3 or 4 countries a month. I was in charge of 28 countries, always on a flight. And so I had to awaken that self-compassion, but I also said, that's only going to work if I figure out what the deal is here, what's different. So I made a list of every single reason I drank, and it was long. And then I asked a bunch of my friends all the reasons that they drank. And so we had this massive list, and I said, okay, I'm going to figure out if this is true. And the great thing about the day and age we live in is you can just literally go onto, any scientific data is stored now in online databases, and you can just pay $50 for a study, $100 for a study, and download it and start to read it. And so I started to read and understand the substance of alcohol and the brain's reaction to alcohol and what it does. And so I'd have a reason like, alcohol relaxes me. And then I'd go do all of this research, and I'd be like, my gosh, not only is that not true, but it actually makes my stress so much worse. This anxiety I've been dealing with since 19 is totally magnified by alcohol. And oh my gosh. And so the thing that was so fascinating is that when the knowledge came in, my emotions started to change. And so after about a year, I remember walking out of my office and telling my husband, like, if you want to drink with me again, tonight's night, because I don't think I'm really going to drink much after tonight. And it wasn't like I'm going to get sober, I'm never going to drink again. Like, those were never really in my vocab. But I was like, okay, I think I'm kind of done for a while. He's like, yeah, right. But yeah, sure. And so we split a bottle of wine. I ended up getting sick, which was just one of those things, which was so funny and perfect. And we didn't even drink that much. We literally split a bottle of wine and I got sick, which was crazy for me because I had such a high tolerance. But then after that, it was, really, really easy. I just didn't want to drink anymore. And I really haven't wanted to have a drink since. And it was just so fascinating. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this information, like the whole time I was learning, by the way, I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known this. I wish I would have known this. How did this not, what's the deal? Like, how isn't this apparent? And so this whole time I was learning, I was like, okay. And so I thought, well, other people need to know this. So I just created a PDF from all my research, all my journals, all my putting together information. And I put it out for free download online. I posted it into a few of the groups that I had joined for other people who were looking to change their relationship with alcohol. And 20,000 people downloaded it in just 2 weeks. And it was crazy. And so then I started to get emails from people saying, hey, you should make this a book, like you should self-publish. And I didn't even know you could self-publish. I was like, I'll look into that. No intention to sort of quit my job. I had a great career and no intention to make this my thing or anything like that. If somebody would have told me, honestly, that like you are going to do something in the alcohol space, I would have just been like, what? You're full of crap. I don't believe you. But anyway, it was such incredible results that the first book I wrote was This Naked Mind. And it was just, started with those journals. And then I did a bunch of research after that to solidify it. I talked to a bunch of different people. One of the pivotal people I spoke with was a man named Dave Gray, who has a method called liminal thinking. And I saw how that was really what I had done without knowing it. So I had a bit of a framework to apply to, it's one thing to kind of have your own journey and sort of feel your way through it. And then it's another thing to say, okay, well, how can I make this into a framework that actually is useful for other people? And so Dave Gray really helped me with that. And it came out and within a few years, it sold 65,000 copies, which is crazy for a self-published book. And it was all really word of mouth. And then it started to get so much attention from traditional publishers. So in 2018, there was an auction between the top 5 publishers in the US for the rights to the book. And I ended up going with Penguin Random House and traditionally publishing This Naked Mind. And then a second book, The Alcohol Experiment. And here we are today.
Oh my gosh, your story is so, so fascinating. And there's so much to unpack there. But, one of the things you mentioned, I think flies in the face of our traditional understanding of how alcohol use disorder works is like, there's that saying, right? Like alcoholics are born, right? As if like the moment you first start getting exposed to alcohol, there's going to be problems and you start to have a very complicated relationship right away. That can be true for very many people, but oftentimes like there's these more I think we're seeing as alcohol is more conditioned on us for different age groups, and like the era that we live in has had it probably way harder than someone growing up in the 70s or 80s. But like it shows that like you could have a normal quote unquote relationship with alcohol, but then over time and exposure, like it can go downhill. And I think that's fascinating because it's just not what we're really told about, alcohol use disorder and things like that. And I think it was really brave of you to be able to, start taking that research because, knowing kind of your personality, there's this like, I don't want to be labeled. I don't want to be like put in a bucket. I don't want to be called I'm weak and powerless. I don't want to go to AA, and for me personally, I remember thinking if I even start learning or like researching or Googling, like, right, even just putting something into Google was like, oh gosh, I'm admitting something, so it's like so much easier to keep it kind of ignored under the rug. And yet it's fascinating because until you get to that level of awareness where you're willing to be honest with yourself, eager for answers, searching for truth, I think that's the very first step towards change, is that I'm ready to be aware, right?
And I think we do such a disservice in our society. I had an interview earlier today with a woman who she's just into like all of her work is about mindful eating, right? And so she came across This Naked Mind and really wanted to have me on her podcast. And one of the things she asked me is she goes, it's so normal for people to think about eating mindfully, but nobody thinks about drinking mindfully. Like, why is that? And I said, well, I think it's because we have this false dichotomy. We have this idea that there's alcoholics and then there's people who are not alcoholics. There's the rest of us. There's the normies. And Alcoholics Anonymous, literally will tell you that there's normal people. And I had an experience about 6 years before I stopped drinking, where one of my closest friends up and got sober, like went to AA, up and got sober, like no warning at all. I mean, we were literally drinking together one day. And I remember vividly 2 days before this, she had come over to my house. It was like mid-afternoon. We drank 2.5 bottles of wine, watched Mamma Mia, and like we're being crazy. And then 2 days later, she comes over and she's like, hey, I got sober. And I was like, what just happened? This is crazy. And I was like, well, what about hello, we drink together all the time. And she said, she's like, Annie, I learned that I'm an alcoholic. I was born this way and you're not. And so I was like, okay. And for me, I was like, well, then I guess I shouldn't worry about questioning this. I guess it doesn't necessarily matter because I'm not an alcoholic. So I guess everything's fine. But there's another whole part of me that was like, nothing's fine. I'm not okay. Things are a mess. And, maybe it wasn't the traditional rock bottoms that you might read about. I certainly wasn't losing my job or my family yet, but they weren't getting any better. I can tell you that much. But we have this idea that there are people who are alcoholics and people who are not. And this idea has been completely disproved in science and in medical circles. And as you referred to, people now use alcohol use disorder, which is a spectrum of use and abuse. And 2 of those questions, by the way, you only have to answer 2 questions in the affirmative to have mild alcohol use disorder. One is, do you drink more than you used to get the same effect, which is every drinker I know. And the other one is, do you ever wish you had times where you drank less than you do? Again, every drinker I know. I don't know somebody who isn't like, oh, I really overdid it last night. Somebody says that at some point in their life. So by that definition, we should all be asking these questions. But it's been created that if we ask these questions, then we might be one of them. And if we're one of them, then we really have a problem. We're kind of this, fraction of society that can't drink responsibly. We're sort of ostracized. What does that mean? Are we dangerous? Can we not be trusted? Are we immoral? Are we going to, mess up people? Are we unsafe? All of these things that get ascribed to this because the entire idea of alcoholic says, I, human, am the problem. We don't have heroinaholics. We don't have cocaineaholics. We don't have like any of those things. We say there's a substance that's addictive that can create harm. And the substance is the problem. Alcohol is the same. The substance is the problem. Any human being can get too much exposure to alcohol, and under the right circumstances, it can become a problem. Any human being, anyone with flesh and blood and bones and brains. It's not just some fraction of the population, but when we believe it is, then it's dangerous to ask the question, am I drinking too much? Because what does that mean? What could that mean? And that's a place where so many people are just so sadly and unfortunately stuck. And I know people are like, well, wait a second. What about it running in families? What about it being genetic? What about this? What about that? Yes, there are instances of in families, you can see generation over generation, people having problems, and then their sons or daughters have problems, et cetera, et cetera. But we don't know for sure that genes are the explanation for that. They have loosely correlated certain genes with presupposition to addiction, but it isn't that anybody who is, we can't like define it, right? Like there isn't a test. We can't go and say, oh, okay, you take that test. Okay, you can never drink because you're never going to be able to drink normally. And you take that test and you can drink fine. Like there's so much other things that apply to it. And a much simpler explanation is that growing up in a house where people are drinking is very unsettling. I know because I grew up in a house where my stepdad drank once my parents got divorced, and it was very unsettling. And anybody who you talk to that's grown up in a house where somebody is drinking actively and drinking a lot, it doesn't feel safe. And we also know that when you drink, and we know this scientifically, and you are drinking in pain, meaning there's anxiety or fear or disease, like lack of ease, lack of peace in your life and your heart, and you have a drink, that alcohol is going to do something different to your brain than if you're just drinking for purely social reasons. It's going to tell your brain, hey, here is a solution. It's going to overstimulate your dopamine. That thing you just did, let's do that thing again. And so humans, just like I said in my journey, I think things really turned for me when I started drinking to self-medicate my postpartum depression. Most people who would say, oh yeah, no, I did get into a problematic relationship with alcohol, they have maybe not a moment, but they're like, oh, it was my divorce. Oh, it was when that tough thing happened. Oh, it was because I started to self-medicate stress at work. Oh, it was because of a pandemic. Whatever the case is, like there's a moment where stress became prevalent and there was more of it in your life and you used alcohol and your brain said, oh, under periods of stress, alcohol is telling me this is relief. And it's completely false relief, of course. But think about to this, through the generation example. So you're a teenager, you're 13, 14, 15, you've been insecure and in your family life, you've had instability because of alcohol. You know how it is. The person who's drinking is either way too affectionate, way too violent, way too emotional, or way too distant, totally unstable. You have a drink, and for the first time, you're like, oh, this feels better. I feel like I can navigate my life. And so then people are like, no, it was that first drink. From that first drink, I knew it was the elixir. It was the thing. It was the perfect solution. I was just born this way. Well, no, you had something in your life that you were self-medicating to where that first drink, because alcohol is a numbing agent, provided that level of relief. And then your brain said, oh, this is the solution for that. And that's a much more logical solution than, some genetics that we've never been able to pinpoint or prove definitively. And it just, all of that is based on science. And so that just goes in the total face of like, no, there's just certain people who are genetically born this way. And that might be true to some extent. There might be some actual genetics involved, but I'll tell you one thing, you will never have a problem with alcohol if you never have a first drink. It's never going to happen. So even, that very idea is like, okay, well, alcohol itself needs some of the blame, if not all of the blame, in my opinion. And when we keep putting it on humans, we just prevent ourselves from honestly questioning our own relationships. I think everybody should be saying, hey, would I be happier drinking a bit less? That would be a great question for every human to be asking, not just the humans that we would say, oh, they have a problem, those over there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, even sometimes there's certain words that I usually gravitate away from because they've lost their meaning, or they only mean a certain subset of people, like even the word addiction. I was reading an article a few years ago, I think now, about how doctors were seeing spikes of people coming in with liver issues, just like pretty bad younger people, a lot of women. And they even made a headline about it, like most of these people with liver issues from alcohol are not addicted. It's like, what's the point of even using that word addicted? Yeah, sure. Physically, a lot of people are not addicted to alcohol, right? But everyone who drinks has some form of emotional dependence on it. You know what I mean? And like, that's the interesting part to talk about, because this is a conversation then for everybody, not just people who assume that they have, a very problematic relationship. And I think you're right with this, the line of questioning. Personally, like, I'm not going to say like everyone needs to take a break or has to take a break. I actually believe everybody deserves to take a break. I mean, why not? If it's like this amazing experience in your life that you could open your eyes, get to know yourself in a new way, a different way, why wouldn't everyone deserve to try it? Right? I'm curious then.
Absolutely. And
oh, please.
I was just going to say a big turning point for me was when I moved from like, I never get to drink again to I never have to drink again. And that really came through, some of the knowledge that I'd gained, and then my emotions really changed around alcohol.
Yeah. So you're like a big researcher, right? You're reading these studies, you're changing a lot of the myths that you had initially believed about alcohol. And you're kind of discovering this, like, the precipice that all personal growth is really developed on, is this idea that we have thoughts that create pain, and we can change our thoughts, which then change our reality. So like, as you kind of describe it, how does that process work through this naked mind kind of modality, to discover what thoughts are kind of keeping you stuck, and then how you can change them and turn to more empowering thoughts?
So it's taken, like I said at the beginning, you feel your way through your own journey. And then if you're trying to apply that to helping other people, you really need more of a framework. So this has kind of been an iterative process for me, but the framework that I have now is called the ACT technique, and it's ACT. So awareness, which is just like, okay, I'm aware of the thought. I can hear myself thinking it. And then clarity, which is really two questions. And that's, how does it make me feel and how does it make me behave? and then a turnaround, which is what is another thought that I can believe, not one that is so far-fetched that I don't believe. And I think we really do ourselves a disservice with some of the positive thinking, like, oh, change your thought, change it to its exact opposite. So for instance, if I don't believe I'm successful, and I say, well, okay, no, I'm going to believe I'm successful. So I'm going to write it on my mirror, and I'm going to put Post-its everywhere, and I'm going to get really like, I'm a success, I'm a success. The problem with that is that if it isn't something believable to you on a subconscious level, you actually, according to Dr. Caroline Leaf, you create neural toxicity in your brain because you're trying to put something into your mind that you don't believe. So part of your mind is just calling BS, and you actually make yourself much more miserable. And so you have to find a thought that you can really believe. And so we say, okay, if I'm a success is at the top of the ladder, what's a first rung thought? What's a thought that's just right above that? And maybe that thought is like, I can learn how to be successful. And maybe that's something you can really believe. Where if you say, how does that make me feel? How does that make me behave? It probably makes you much more motivated than either A, believing I am a success and not really believing it, or B, believing I'm not successful and just feeling defeated all the time, right? And so we apply that to alcohol in the sense of, I'm never going to have fun without a drink. That's a thought that a lot of people have. Like, oh, if I give up drinking, life isn't going to be fun. Well, if you're trying not to drink, say you're taking a break, or if you're feeling like alcohol is really creating issues in your life and you have that thought, how is that making you feel? Like, it's making you feel pretty miserable. It's making you feel stuck. It's making you feel as if there's no hope or no answer, as if you just have to choose between two awful options, drinking and having the physical or you impact of drinking or over drinking, or not drinking and never having fun. Like, both of those sound like they suck. So you just feel stuck. How does that make you behave? It probably makes you just want to drown it out with another bottle of wine because it's super painful, all those feelings. And if you can say, okay, what if I have a thought that could just be a little different than that could at least open some curiosity and some self-compassion? And what if that thought is like, I don't know if I'll be able to have fun without drinking? Like, even that, like, I don't know, all of a sudden you have a whole different outlook. Okay, I don't know, but am I willing to try? Maybe. I don't know, but do other people? Maybe. All of a sudden you have curiosity. All of a sudden you have possibly hope. You don't feel stuck. And so that is such a minor shift, right? It's going from, I'm never going to have fun without drinking, to, I don't know if I can have fun without drinking. Doesn't even sound like anything different, but the change is how it makes you feel and how it makes you behave. And then you can move up the next rung of the ladder. Like, what? I'm going to try to have fun without drinking. Might not be fun. I'm allowing for that. I'm not going to make myself believe something I don't believe yet, but I'm going to try. I'm going to set up a situation. I'm going to go out one night. I'm going to just try it. I'm going to see what happens. And it's through that process, I think, that we really awaken the curiosity and the self-compassion that allows us to change.
That was life-changing for me, I think, is like I actually took a break from alcohol. Probably not my first, but like the second time around. And that's when I finally plugged into, more of the content that you provide is so amazing. I think I did the alcohol experiment back in 2018. I don't know what month, but but it wasn't just like, it was the line of questioning, but then it was also like the ability to match it up with a different experience, because like that was me. Like, I can't have fun without drinking. I grew up partying a lot when I was in college. So I had the heavy drinking story when I was much younger. And then for about 7 years after that was this, like, what I call the moderation illusion. It was the rules, the like promises. It was always less, and it was always like you said, it was just depriving myself. I would even take weeks off alcohol. And those were like the weeks when I didn't go out. I didn't like see any friends, but it was actually, so like, say the same idea, the same belief, I'm not fun without drinking. I believe that, and it's not like it's something I verbalized, but it was just so subconscious. Like, this is what my social life, my sense of confidence is all like underpinning on, my sense of like what makes the world fun, which when you really think about it is one of the saddest thoughts in the world, that like this beautiful, magical, abundant universe, playground of the world isn't fun unless we're like numbed with some substance, like as if like going to see waterfalls and doing kayaking and just all the incredible things that we get to explore here on this planet aren't, like gifts. But to actually take that thought, like I'm not fun without drinking, and not only explore is there a different thought, but then like start matching it up with experimenting. I mean, I think I love that that's the word you use, because like, well, why don't I go out and see? Why don't I go out and test this? And it's not just one time you might try it, but like over time, you might actually completely garner so much evidence in the other side of the camp that, it's like a seesaw. You completely have debunked that initial thought. And that's, my eyes were just so open to that experience, because everything I used to think just turned around on its head. And the new thoughts, the new beliefs were 100% better, 100% more empowering, because they put the power back in me, like I am fun. I am fun. I don't need anything to be fun, and anytime I reached for a drink, like at a party or something, I was literally telling my subconscious, you're not enough on your own. You need a drink to be better, which is really damaging for your self-esteem. But I think I love in one way that, you have this kind of journey for someone to really learn more and to stop chastising themselves about like trying to change their relationship with alcohol. And at the same time, you have this other journey for people to really experiment with a break and let it be just a learning experience, when they can really start grasping new things about themselves. What really lights them up, like that's the essential question too. If we all think that drinking is so fun and relaxing, like, well, what about like what organically lights us up? There's so much out there to discover. And I think the most beautiful thing why I do what I do, and probably why you're so touched to it, is this isn't really just a question about alcohol. It's really a journey back to self, a journey of discovering who you really are, what you really want, and what you really need to take care of yourself as well. And obviously, as you went on this journey, not only do you pivot your relationship with alcohol, you pivot your whole life, right? I mean, you write a book, you launch a company, you start a movement that brings you so much more purpose and fulfillment, because you're just actively changing lives. So can you share a little bit about, like, I think we stopped around the time that the TNM got published traditionally. So like, what's it kind of exploded for you then to give you even more meaning and purpose in your life?
Oh man, it's been like so growing. And first, before I get into that, I just want to touch on something you said, which is like, it is a journey back to self. And I like how you said that, because I'm such a firm believer that for so long, I was trying to learn how to love myself, or learn how to have self-compassion for myself, or learn how to do all these things, as if I had to add new things that I didn't have. And for me, that process is actually exactly the opposite. And when I saw that it was the opposite of that, I was like, oh, this is so much easier. It isn't about learning how, it's about finding all the places where you believe lies that aren't true. Because we do very organically. I mean, I can look at my daughter, she's 3 years old, and like, oh my gosh, like she'll take a video, she's dancing in front of the mirror, she's like, oh, it's you, this is so amazing. Like, we actually have a very divine, very profound appreciation for ourselves. I mean, you can see it in survival, right? Like, and in protecting and mama bear, but then we think well, we can't do that otherwise, because it's at the detriment to other people, which is never true. Actually, if you are really a whole, filled up human being who has their needs met, I think just naturally you want to serve others. That's what comes from that. It isn't that you live in that place of scarcity, but it isn't about adding more stuff or learning. It's really about deconstructing where were the moments where I learned that I am somehow separate from other people, where I learned that I don't belong, where I learned that I'm not enough, where I learned that there's something that I needed to be that isn't natural for me in order to fit in. Where did I start to put on these masks and costumes? And when you take that down, then, it isn't like this hard thing to love yourself. You just do very naturally, because you've just really reawakened what has been inside of you all the time. And one of the things I say in the alcohol experiment, because there's a whole journal section in that book now, is you have all the wisdom inside of you. Like, you are going to be able to know and more for yourself than I would ever be able to tell you, or any teacher would ever be able to tell you. It's just, how do you unlock that? How do you get still enough and quiet enough and peaceful enough to listen to your own self? And I think that only happens, the catch-22 here, it's really hard to do that when you're drinking. Really hard. It's almost impossible, right? And so it's like, okay, so I'm going to have all these emotions explode because I'm going to live my life awake. But the emotions are actually the path to find out what I need to unlearn in order to really heal. Sorry, I know you can edit that out. My dad came to visit. He just called me and I'm like, I should have just, anyway, here, I'll clap for your editor.
Thank you.
So back to the original question is like, what about my journey? That's really what it's been, is when I came into this, there was all of that stuff, all of that uncertainty, all of that, who did I need to be in the world in order to be okay? And I think one of the most difficult moments in my life was when I got everything I wanted. I was 33 years old. I now had 2 kids. I had this incredible job. I had, amazing husband, had 2 dogs, great house in the mountains where I wanted to be living. And I looked around and I was still waking up with a pit in my stomach. I was still depressed. I was still upset. I still couldn't find joy in the days and the moments. And all of the things that I thought if I could just get there, then I'd gotten. And I really, that was another thing that I just started to self-medicate so heavily, because I remember looking around my life thinking, if I can't be happy in this, I'm totally screwed. I am broken. There's something wrong with me. My brain is a mess. I am like, there's no hope. And it's probably one of the only times in my life where I've really thought like, yeah, this world would just be better without me in it, because it was so hard to have realized everything I thought I wanted and realize that none of it was ever going to be enough. And that entire journey to getting everything I thought I wanted at 33 years old, the heavy corporate life, the drinking life, the striving, the achieving, the, trying to come out of, relatively intense upbringing with, not a lot of financial resources. All of that was fueled by scarcity and by lack and by competition and by, being better than and trying to make a name for myself and ego. And that animating energy can get you so far, right? It certainly did. It got me everything I thought I wanted. And so this leg of the journey has been completely the 180 of that. And it actually has been, okay, I have had to realize so much how all of this entire conversation around mindful drinking and being sober curious and humans awakening to what we're medicating with on a huge scale, whether it's technology and internet or porn or drugs or alcohol or whatever it is, food, this is going to happen with or without me. I get to be invited into doing this work if I can do it from a joyful heart with the right energy of giving in abundance, rather than the wrong energy. And not wrong, but the energy that was really toxic. It had a huge cost. When I was running my life through the energy of competition and scarcity and trying to make a name for myself as I did in corporate, there was a huge cost there. And the cost was self-medicating. And now I have to just, really come back to, no, I get to do this work. And guess what? I am going to do it joyfully, and I'm going to do it playfully, even if it's the most serious work on the planet, even if I'm getting letters from women who are losing their children, or, people who have just lost somebody to liver disease at a very young age. I mean, it's happening to 28-year-olds now, 32-year-olds, you hear about it all the time. Even if it's the most serious work in the world, I have to hold it lightly, because it's not my job to save people or anyone really. It's just my job to, if I get to join in this conversation, in this message, and that's a gift. And it's a gift that I really want to steward well. But I came initially to this and I had to unravel a lot of that, because when I first started to get letters from people who had read my book, I couldn't even read them without pain, even if they were the nicest thank you letters ever, because this is what my brain would tell me. It would say, somebody would write me a letter like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I've been trying everything. I've done all these other things. This is the first thing that's worked for me. Thank you so much. You saved my life. And I would take that and I would put it on my shoulders. And I'd be like, what happens when? What if this person drinks again? What if this happens? What if, and I have all this weight and all this pressure. And it was really crushing. And, you know, the journey for me has been about really unraveling that and saying, why am I trying to take that all on myself? What is it that I'm trying to prove to anyone and to myself about my own worthiness? And to find a place of worthiness apart from the work, apart from whatever corporate job I have, apart from how many, you know, books have sold, or apart from all of that, just to find, you know, really reawaken and deconstruct the things that, no, I'm worthy just because I am, and find that, and then do all this work from a totally different energy. And I think that transition for me, I think the first 2 years that I was doing this, I was coming from that place of fear and intensity and over pressure and over responsibility. And all of that is ego driven. All of that is just me saying that I'm so important in this conversation. And all of that was false. And so transitioning now into, no, I'm just invited. And guess what? Like, if I can do this or not do this, but I want to. And so I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it lightly and with joy. And, you know, that's really been the biggest game changer for me.
Wow. I don't think I've ever heard someone say that so eloquently. Like, it's not the outcome, it's the motivation behind and the energy we bring to it, you know, because, you know, obviously there's people who will find massive fulfillment in the corporate world, and, you know, that's great for them. And here you are in a very service-based kind of industry now, really helping people change their lives. But like you said, if you come at it with the wrong energy, the wrong kind of pressure, the wrong kind of comparisonitis, you know, like it can feel very different. And I'm just so curious, like, it's such a profound wisdom that you just shared. Like, was there any kind of growth that you did in particular to really shift from that like scarcity ego driven mindset towards this one of contribution and service and abundance?
Oh my gosh, so much, so much. I mean, so many different books, and I'm just trying to think of a few that were so helpful for me. I mean, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle was an incredible book. Loving What Is by Byron Katie really helped me. The Go-Giver is just a cute little fable, but it's such a good little book about doing stuff with the right heart. The Great Work of Your Life is really good. The War of Art, is that it, by Stephen Presserfield? That was another incredible one. And so many of those types of things. But also for me, it was actually, you know, a lot of it was applying the process we talked about earlier to my everyday life. So I started keeping, you know, little notebooks with me no matter where I went, and they'd be these little things, and I'd have this thing in the back, and it says energy snags. And I just, every time I felt myself getting dark, getting heavy, getting emotional, getting upset, I'd write down the circumstance, and I'd come back and be like, what was I thinking? What was I thinking in that moment? And often I'd be thinking, I'm doing it wrong. That was a classic thought that I had. I'm doing it wrong, or I'm screwing this up. Like, those were another ones. And so I'd go through the process. Well, how does that make me feel? And by the way, you can't skip that part. You really have to say, how does it make me feel? And how does it make me behave? Because that's the thing that shows your brain that thought is painful. And it's kind of like a candle flame. Like, the first time you touch a candle flame, it hurts. You're never going to touch it again. You don't have to exert effort to not touch that beautiful, shiny, orangey, you know, yellow candle flame, because you know it hurts, and it's effortless. And so showing the brain the pain of that thought of, I'm doing it wrong. You know, how does it make me feel? Well, it makes me feel like I want to hide. It makes me feel like I'm, you know, messing this up. I'm unworthy. How does it make me behave? It makes me want to quit. Right. And then finding another thought that was more empowering and just one rung up on the ladder. So, you know, even if the first thought was, I don't know if I'm doing it wrong, I might be doing it right. How do I know? Both things I just made up, by the way. Either one, I just made them up. Nobody actually knows. And then getting to thoughts like, I'm doing my best. And just, you know, methodically working through that. And it's been a multi-year process of literally just hundreds and thousands of things that I've written down, and I've worked through that process of what's something better that I can think, what's an energy that's better that I can bring to this. And sometimes it takes a lot of tries. Sometimes you go through and you come up with a new thought, and then you realize it's making you miserable too. And you're like, I got to go back to the drawing board. I always like to take that new thought and put it back through that filter of, how does it make me feel and how does it make me behave? But just really relentlessly doing that, and doing it in journals, doing it out loud, doing it with other people. You know, we do this together in our sort of coaching calls and stuff, and just going deep on that one thing has been profound. And then meditation has been huge. and exercise had always been huge, but it was something that for me, and my whole family is like this, like if I don't exercise, I am restless, I am uncomfortable, I need to get that extra energy out somehow, some way. So daily exercise, often high intensity, and meditation. The best book I ever read was Stress Less, Accomplish More, because it was so science-based about the benefits. And so it really got me over the hump of like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to try to sit, at least once a day, often twice a day for the 15 to 20 minutes and just let my mind rest and wander. And, not about clearing my thoughts at all, but letting it wander. And all of those things cumulatively kind of allow me to see things more clearly. But, if I had to sum it up, I would say it's really slowing down to speed up. It's really putting down the urgency, putting down the pressure. Every time you feel scrunchy and intense and overwhelmed and pressurized, saying, whoa, okay, that just means I have to stop. That just means I have to stop. And if that means I have to stop and go read a mystery novel or go on a walk, I have to stop if I'm bringing that type of energy to my work. I literally refuse to bring that type of energy to my work, and I don't do it anymore. And it's just been such a gift to me. And I think everybody around me too. And we really have seen just like incredible, like sort of magnetic growth in the movement because of that. And I think everything, it grows as fast as the leader grows. And you think the leader, okay, you're going to grow in a lot of techniques and you're going to get really good at these certain things. And maybe you're going to, learn how to record the best podcast ever or get the best tech for your website or all these things that we think are the things. But the thing is the human behind the whole thing. How peaceful and present and what type of energy is that human bringing? That puts something different out into the world. And that's, now that I see that clearly, I'm just really committed to it. And I'm really committed for everybody on my team. We actually have a core value called selflessly selfish, which means if you're bringing the wrong energy to something, if you're feeling frantic, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling hurried, stop. I've had times where we've just shut everything down. Like we're scheduled to have a live alcohol experiment. We just shut it down. I'm like, nope, it's too frantic. It's too much. We have to stop. We have to slow down to speed up, and just being, adhering to that one principle sort of above all else has been the most profound thing, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's so powerful how like you're basically asking yourself, like you get to choose again, like you stop yourself, you find yourself in the wrong energy and you get to choose again. And ultimately you always get to choose and you always get to design a life that you really want. But just as you shared, like with your note cards and stopping yourself and reading this book and doing it takes work. It takes a lot of work. It is, right? But it's so worth it. It's so worth it because otherwise we're stuck in the programming we received from childhood and from growing up and packing on all of the insecurities and all of the stress and all of the ego and just all of that negative energy that, we get as a human condition, just growing up in this world. Like, I think personal growth is just a beautiful, beautiful gift that we all deserve, to grow ourselves. And I can see a huge shift myself. I think it was in the fall that I really dedicated myself to just joy every day. And my whole brand is called Euphoric. So, joy is something that like, I believe comes with a break from alcohol, but like, I wanted to take it up a notch, like I just wanted to do nice things for myself every day, read the kind of books I really wanted to read, explore new things, just really start becoming a dabbler in this magical playground, and my business at the same time just like blossomed, and it's crazy how that works. It's not the techie strategy, like you said, it's the person. And I think that that's true for all kind of success, whether someone's a business owner or not in life, and it isn't selfish because you then become the most effective version of yourself, the most loving version of yourself. Thank you so much for bringing all those points up. I'm curious, just one more question. What's next for This Naked Mind?
That's such a great question. And just on the last thing we were talking about, I wanted to share a quote that one of my coaches gave me that I just think is the best. And it said, the longevity of a leader is predicated on their ability to do it again with all their heart. So it's never going to be easy. It's always going to be a lot of work, but just like consistently doing it again with all your heart. Every time you push yourself out of your comfort zone, every time you fall down, every time you do anything. And I think that's the longevity of anything. This journey it's not about like, so you drink and you're mad at yourself, like do it again. pick yourself up, do it again with all your heart. That's the path. That's the way forward. So what's next is, wow, we are really looking at expanding beyond alcohol, which is super exciting. So I've partnered with William Porter, and we are just in talks with Penguin Random House about This Naked Mind for Nicotine. We've written the first draft, and so we are, I think, very close to a deal, which is great. So that should be coming out in 2022. And looking at doing, a sugar challenge and some other things with some of our coaches that are also nutritionalists, and really expanding beyond just alcohol and applying the methodology to other things, which is super exciting.
Yeah, I love it, right? Because it's like ultimately we're finding ways to fill these holes, that we find we're just not enough. Like that's Tony Robbins, I think, says that the greatest fears we have are that I am not enough, therefore I am not lovable. And so it's like the human condition to search for things outside of ourselves, to make ourselves feel whole, but most of them don't work. And they take us even further away, by numbing and distracting us and kind of stealing away, I think, that presence that is really the gift of life and the gift of being fully immersed in your experiences, your relationships. It's not easy again, but it's worth it. So I'm so appreciative of you being on the show today, Annie. And where can people find you and all the good experiments and books and all the things that you offer?
Awesome. Well, books are Barnes & Noble or Amazon, wherever books are sold. But the best resource I have is The Alcohol Experiment, and it is always free at alcoholexperiment.com, or it is now on the App Store, which is super cool. So App or Google Play can download it, and it just takes you through the 30 days. Every day you get a video and an email, and it's really profound.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate you.
All right.